the conversation is going to be tailored around monitoring and preventing threats as employees transition from home into office. We have on the call with me, Chris Adamson, and I'll go ahead and let him introduce himself. Chris?
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris Adamson. I work for Salt Lake County, information security engineer. Been in IT for about 20 years and in security specifically for about the last 10.
Awesome. Yeah, Chris has done quite a few events with us in the Salt Lake City area. And so he has some really good stories about using Elastic and using it for security, especially in the Salt Lake County. So when we had this date open, I immediately went right to him. So my name is Jared Payne. I think I've met a few of you, but just in case I haven't, I'm the Principal Solutions Architect for Elastic here in the West. What we'll do is we'll get started on the housekeeping logistics. So you guys are, everybody is automatically muted. Q&A will be at the end of the webinar. That's kind of an iffy thing. If you have a question as we're going, please just feel free to unmute yourself and just ask away. I want this to be a lively conversation. So the more that we can have the open dialogue, the better. When you're using the chat, make sure that you send a question. So if you don't feel like talking and you want to just type it out in the chat, make sure that you select in the chat the all panelists and attendees rather than just all panelists, because what's going to happen is that I'm going to get it, and which is great, but I'd love for everybody on the call to actually see it. And then the recording will be available after the webinar, and we will email it to all the registrants. So Elastic, super quick, simple slide. What is Elastic? We are a search company. Everything you do is search. Whether you're looking for food on Yelp, whether you're looking for an item in a search history bar, or whether you're digging through logs, whether it be syslog, web logs, it doesn't matter. It's all search. And search is the heart of everything that we do here at Elastic. And so we have 3 solutions that are powered by one stack. On the left, we have Elastic Enterprise Search. And so that consists of site search, app search, and workplace search. And then the center tier column, we have Elastic Observability, your visibility into your data, right? Your APM management, your uptime, your logs, your metrics. And then the last thing is Elastic Security. And that is what we're going to be talking about today, specifically, which is our SIM. It's still about collecting logs, data, metrics, and then also endpoint as well. But all 3 of these solutions are powered by the Elastic Stack. One common language, one common file, one common solution stack, and they all go together. So with the stack, you can deploy it anywhere. We have an Elastic Cloud, which is fully SaaS model, or we have fully orchestrated Elastic, where you can take it, bring it in-house, put it in your cloud environment, and orchestrate until your heart is content. So if you're looking for upcoming events, this is a really good link to go ahead and take a look at these. So not only upcoming, but past. So if you want to take a look at some of the things that we have recorded, please feel free to go to elastic.co/videos, and you will find everything, any video content from Elastic until your heart is happy. We have an upcoming event here at Elastic, which I will be hosting with another company called Cribble. Cribble is an ingestion tool, which helps from migration from Splunk into Elastic. Since people are working from home and a lot of budgets are being cut due to COVID, a lot of people are looking at picking and choosing what type of logs that they have to ingest and or view, monitor. And so because of that, a lot of people are moving over to Elastic. And so we wanted to make a migration path easy for them. Even if you are sticking with Splunk, but need to put the data that you're dropping on the floor into Elastic, we're going to make it super simple. So if you're interested in that, on how to get more data away from Splunk into Elastic, please feel free. We have a workshop coming up, and it is on August 12th. So hopefully see you there, and the link is on the bottom right-hand corner. Feel free to register. The next Sled virtual group is on August 26th, and it'll be hosted by Ruben. So we're going to be talking about viewing your systems logs with Elastic, all under 10 minutes. Make sure that you subscribe to the state and local government, the Sled user group. That way you get updates every time we get a new user group up and running, and that way we put the date on. So that's it. That's all with the housekeeping. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing here. I'm gonna cut back into this. So let's get started. So first of all, Chris, I'm gonna open up that chat real quick. Okay, perfect. Okay, so Chris, first of all, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it. Hopefully this is super informative to everybody that's on the line. The first things first, from a security perspective, an IT security perspective, how did you hear about Elastic? I know we have a large community, but how did you hear about it? And then what led you to actually start using Elastic and then implement it from a security perspective?
Yeah, so going back to about 2014, 2015, myself and a colleague, a guy named John Tidwell, who might be listening in, but he and I are who built our Elastic cluster and made it what it is. So got to give him a little bit of credit. We were tasked with finding we had an old CM Nitro security thing that had been taken over by McAfee, and we had all kinds of problems with it. It was just an old piece of hardware. And so our boss tasked us with replacing that. And we probably did proof of concepts on, I don't know, a dozen different vendors' products, all the way from things like Cisco's AMP for endpoints and to things like IBM's QRadar and what used to be HP's ArcSight. And our biggest problem was being a state and local government, and after the 2008 recession, we just don't really have any money. There's no way we can afford something like Cylance. We really liked Cylance. We couldn't afford the $400,000 a year subscription price tag. It just wasn't going to happen. So we were really frustrated, and we were just kind of scratching our heads wondering what we were going to do. And John came across a blog post. A guy who goes by the handle of Cyber War Dog. Maybe some of you heard of it, but you can Google it and see his blog. He had a blog post sometime in 2015 or 2016 that talked about ingesting sysmon logs with Elastic. And John brought this to my attention, and I wasn't even a third of the way through the blog where I'm just like, we have to do this. We have to do this. And so we had our own VMware environment as a security team where we could do testing. And we'd been doing that, and we just dumped everything off there. And we set up a small Elastic cluster based on his blog, and we set up 10 or 15 workstations that we could cobble together and put sysmon on them, and started figuring out how to ingest logs to see what we could do. And so that's how it got started. Basically, the free version of Elastic and sysmon, and we just started ingesting logs from endpoints just to see how it worked. And man, it just grew like wildfire. We showed our boss what we were doing and asked for more resources and said, we'd really like to take this into production. And went through some testing and then started pushing out WinLog beats to endpoints, and created a production cluster. Took basically what we were using for ArcSight logger, which we had, and dumped that and took that storage and put it towards Elasticsearch. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how we got started. And I mean, it just, the kinds of things that we could get from the endpoint, sysmon logs, was just astounding. We were just ecstatic that something we could find for free, and it just took our time and efforts, was going to provide us with such useful information. So that's basically how we got started.
That's awesome. I'm going to start digging in a little bit into, because I'm curious, just from a working from home perspective, on just how it changed your security, at least your view towards protecting your environment. But in all, just a super high level overview, don't need to go into detail, but what type of logs are you ingesting in there right now? You said syslog, right?
Well, so yeah, for Windows endpoints, we're using WinLog beats, and we have sysmon installed, both
Yeah.
user endpoints and servers. But we also, so we're pulling sysmon logs, and then we have a list of events that we like from the regular, security logs in the Windows Event Viewer channel. And we have several events we pull from there. But we also have put winlog beats and sysmon on our domain controllers. So we're pulling authentication events from domain controllers. We put packet beats on our domain controllers because they're our first, they're our internal DNS servers. So we also pull logs from our F5. We pull logs from Cisco ICE authentication logs. And I'm trying to think all of the things. I probably should have brought up my instance so I could remember all the little indexes I have. But DNS, domain controller, sysmon logs, ICE. We have some Linux things in there from some newer Linux servers, but most of those are going away, so that's kind of dying off. We're looking at some other things like IIS logs from our Outlook web access stuff, so we can see who's coming in from that, and I can elaborate on why that's important to us. But so we're looking at a whole bunch of stuff that we haven't pulled in yet, but we've got to expand our current cluster because we basically, because of the retention limits that we want and the amount of logs we have coming in, we've basically filled up our space. So we need to expand and upgrade so we can pull more things in. But that's basically it as far as what we're ingesting right now.
So so it's I mean, you're pulling in quite a bit of data then.
If you've ever looked at sysmon and what it pulls, you end up creating a sysmon configuration log that really weeds out the noise, right? You don't want every single disk read and write. You don't want probably 50 to 60% of what sysmon's going to feed to you. It's just noise from a security perspective. So there's a lot of tuning that goes on there, and then we do a little bit of tuning. We use Logstash to enrich logs in different ways and to kind of filter out that noise. So the kinds of things, I mean, you say winlog beats and sysmon, but process creates, process terminations, who's using PowerShell, how long are the PowerShell scripts, all the things that go on there, network connections.
Yeah.
When is someone's browser connecting to something? Where is it going? You can look at the DNS records. And I can go into several different use case scenarios about how we use those. But there's so many logs that can be generated from sysmon, and it's on the endpoint, and you get them before anything's encrypted across the network. And I can see, I know more about what the end user is doing on their computer than they know, just by gathering these logs. And so it's been really useful. Gone are the days of having to ask someone, did you click on that link in that phishing email? And 99% of the time you're going to get, oh no, I would never do that. I remember the training, we didn't do that. And then you go and look deeper and you find out, well, yeah, they did click. And they're just embarrassed to say, or maybe they're scared to have to take training again. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I don't even have to ask those questions anymore. I already know what the answer is with no logs.
You talked about, you just said a comment about phishing, and especially with everyone working from home, right? Not being in the office, being able to click on links and emails anytime they want, ransomware, malware, data exfiltration. I don't necessarily know if that is something that you're dealing with now, more so because people are working from home in general. They're not necessarily internal, working in your actual in your building, right? But like working from home, especially during COVID, especially during budget cuts, how has it changed the way that you deal with security at Salt Lake County? Like, what are you doing? How has Elastic helped you from a security perspective? Make it easier, make it faster, more productive? What are some of the security things that you're seeing or that have happened internal to Salt Lake County? And then how have you stopped them? How has Elastic helped?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of challenges, right? There are a certain amount of people with things like Office 365 that can look at email and do things that don't require a VPN connection back to our environment. So that's a little bit challenging. You have to kind of put up a Logstash instance that's available from the internet and configure them to spit their logs to that, but it can be done. And for the most part, the people who are doing most of the work from home are using an IPsec VPN. And when they connect to that, we get their logs still through that. It communicates just as if it was on the network and getting their logs. So a good example, I've seen a lot of it's not your typical phishing email, right? Someone else has been compromised, possibly a vendor, someone that you normally exchange emails with, and they've been compromised, and then their email account's been used to try and propagate the phishing email or malware or whatever it is that the bad guy's trying to do. And so the likelihood that people are going to click on that has been much higher. And we had that happen. So this is kind of an example of how I would use Elastic Stack in that instance. And I should preface this with, Elastic is one tool that we have. So it works in conjunction with all your other stuff, your firewalls and, your email security appliance. So, we'll get a report of a phishing email from various sources or various ways. And we'll go in and see, what the details are, who it is, what is the URL maybe that's included in the phishing email. And a pretty common scenario would be something like, you get a phishing email, Bob gets a phishing email from maybe he works in facilities, an HVAC guy, and he gets a phishing email from a vendor that he's used to interacting with. So the link in the phishing email oftentimes comes from, say, a known file sharing site, Dropbox, or SharePoint Online, or Google Docs, something pretty common, because the bad guys know that they have to get around an email security appliance. So they're going to put something in there that's going to have a good reputation, not going to throw any red flags. And then, so Bob clicks the link in the email from the vendor. The link goes to Dropbox. Then in Dropbox, there's a PDF document that then contains another link. And that link, if the bad guy knows what they're doing, that link will be fairly innocuous too. Maybe it goes through SendGrid. Maybe it goes through some other marketing service like that. So it doesn't throw any red flags at Dropbox. But as soon as they click on that link, it redirects them to, just for an example, evil.com. So now you're at a page that wants to log in. And so you're at your fourth site now, your fourth different web server, and it's off somewhere. You've been redirected to the bad guy's web server. You put in your authentication, and oftentimes they'll be smart enough to redirect that authentication to Office 365 just to make sure that it's a valid account. Depending on what response they get back, depends on where you go next. So you put your credentials in, and you just get redirected to some innocuous website or some publicly available document, and you're just like, what is this? Why, what just happened? And then people oftentimes at that point will be like, oh man, I just got phished, and so they might report it at that point. Well, so now I go back into maybe our security appliance, email security appliance, and I go and look and see everybody that got this email. And then I'll go straight to Elastic, and I'll go to our PacketBeat index, which records our DNS logs. And I'll look for, Dropbox isn't going to do me any good because there's going to be a lot of those. SendGrid's not going to do me any good. Actually, I should back up a little bit, because if these are something like I've described, I might have, I've got a computer that I've put an old workstation that I've put on our guest network, and I will go to that machine and I'll click through these links and see where it goes and see if I can figure out what's happened. As soon as I have the link to, as soon as I see that it directs you to URL that's, evil.com, now I have something. So now I go into Elastic, I look at our DNS logs for, show me every time that you've seen a log with evil.com in the URL. And I'll get back, just as an example, maybe I'll get back 50 hits. I'll see 50 people actually clicked enough to get to the evil.com site. Then on my workstation, maybe I'll put in some credentials from a test account or something that I have control over, and I'll see where it goes next once credentials have been entered. And then I'll get, if I get some innocuous sites, so let's say fatburnerpills.com, something stupid that it doesn't really make any sense. Now I can look at that DNS log as well, and that gives me two things. So if I see everybody who's hit evil.com, now I have a list of every computer, every user that's gone to the evil site. But I don't know who's entered passwords. But if I look for, fatburnerpill.com, the site they're redirected to after they enter passwords, and maybe I get 10 people who've made that request. Now I know who visited the site, who's visited this malicious site, people that are going to need more training. And then I have a list of 10 computers or 10 people that have gone to the redirected site after they've entered credentials. So now I know exactly who's clicked on the link, and I know exactly who's entered credentials. And I don't have to ask those questions. I can go back and say, okay, these users, these computers, their accounts were compromised. Communicate with the service desk, say these people need to be contacted and their passwords need to be changed ASAP. And if you can't get a hold of them, then disable their account until we can. And so what Elastic provides us in that instance is the answers instantly, right? I can see who's done what computer, and I'm pretty certain that I have full containment on what's going on, and I'll know exactly which user accounts and which computers to worry about. And that's a pretty common scenario, right? Phishing has gone crazy lately, and I see a lot of compromised accounts, legitimate domains whose users have been compromised for one reason or another, and now they're propagating this malware, or they're sending out these links to these credential harvest phishing sites. And that's a pretty common scenario.
Yeah, so you said something that reminded me. You were talking about passwords, and the other day we were having a conversation, and you made a comment about you were using Elastic on a specific case about a password spray attack that you thought had happened at Salt Lake County. Can you walk the people that are listening to this, what happened, what you think happened, and then how you found it in Elastic, and then went through the whole process?
Sure. So we've got a good chunk of users. I don't remember how many off the top of my head that are Office 365 users who can run Outlook through Office 365, and they don't need a direct connection to Exchange. But and we have a pair of Active Directory federated servers that we use for authentication. So there's two of those, and they load balance. And the other day, all of a sudden, we started getting alerts from Elastic. We use a product called Elast Alert, which is a third-party product that we then configure to look in the logs and alert us if it sees certain conditions. And we got this alert that said, this account has sent, I forget our threshold, I think it's 50, has sent 50 unique password failures. And so we get this alert, and it's like, whoa, okay, that's the federated servers, that's coming from Office 365, we've got a problem. So I start digging through the logs, and I try and find some of this, and in the logs I see the source user as O365 admin. which now I'm freaking out because I'm like, does our Office 365 admin service account been compromised or what's going on? And so I start asking questions, and people are like, what? You're seeing what? And I'm like, yeah, this is, nobody else had any idea that anything was going wrong. And so I start giving them details, and it's like, yeah, these things are trying, this account isn't really sending passwords. It's sending Kerberos tickets, impersonation tickets. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, that's normal stuff, right? You have a session open, you've been granted a ticket. It uses that to authenticate you. No big deal. And they're like, well, what server is it coming from? So, give them the server name, and the server admins start to go back and look at this. And they're like, well, ADFS1 is not responding. It's we can't get into it. It's not working. I'm like, well, okay, maybe there's some other problem. So they're like, well, let's just see if we can reboot the server and get it back. Long story short, what had happened was server number 1 had gone down for whatever reason. I don't know that we ever figured out what it was, but it wasn't behaving like it should. It wasn't processing the authentication requests. So the load balancer was sending everything to the second server. Well, the second server didn't generate the Kerberos. It came from server number 1. So to the second server, it was like, hey, these are new. This isn't, I don't recognize these. And so it saw them as a ton of failed authentication attempts, which manifests itself as a password spray. And really all it was the one server, just one leg of our system went down. And the security team was the first people to see it, simply because we were alerting on a password spray from those federated servers. So it wasn't really an attack, but as this, if the security team is first one to see these things when they happen, yeah, it makes you look really good. It gives you some credibility, because what's going on, and other people are scratching their heads and don't have any idea what's going on.
So internal to, especially working from home, right? How do you see, let's pretend this continues. I'm hoping it doesn't. I'd love to get out there and shake your hand again at some point. But if let's say this work from home thing continues, how do you see, as a security admin, how do you see this changing from a security perspective? Or how do you see this Salt Lake County actually viewing their security posture? And then how do you see your growth with Elastic, on using Elastic to kind of change with the time? One of the things is that I think Elastic is throwing a wrench in the cog of the machine by challenging the status quo of what security is against legacy vendors. In the fact that, you can ingest anything and everything without having to worry about threshold limits or devices or endpoint data. So with that said, a lot more stuff is coming in from VPNs and IPsec, everything that's coming in from a work from home standard. As the security landscape evolves, so does Elastic. But how do you see it internally to Salt Lake? How do you see that evolving with Elastic in the future?
Well, yeah, and we were never really geared up to be a work from home environment, right? It's government, we have offices, we have rec centers, we have all these things. People go to offices. It was never really a distributed workforce. So we've really kind of had to scramble. Really, the biggest part of our problem was the VPN. We just have enough resources allocated to VPN to deal with it. But we're also going to have to put things, like I talked about before, Logstash instance that's publicly available, and then push configuration out to WinLogBeats so that it sees, this is where I should send things, and if this isn't available, then I need to send it here, so that we can ingest logs from people's workstations who maybe they're only using Office 365 and they're not connected to the VPN, but we're still going to pull their system logs across the internet based on how we set that up. So that's something we're still kind of working on. our biggest problem right now is mobile devices, and people just want to
Yeah.
use their mobile device to read emails, and so that's really been kind of a loss of control for us. And I'm not sure how we do that. So all those mobile devices have to go through, the Outlook web access. So we've turned kind of our sights onto those IIS logs. How are we going to get those? And how does that traffic flow through there? And how can we leverage that to keep an eye on what mobile devices are doing from an email perspective? And so that's kind of something we're working on. That's that's a work in progress. But we've had to scramble a little bit just because we were never really set up to be a distributed workforce. But things like that, and going hand in hand with that are obviously MFA in front of everything you can get it in front of, including the OWA. Because the thing we've seen recently is, an account gets compromised through phishing, and then the bad guys want to log into OWA, and there's a wealth of information in there they can steal. Your global address book list, information about all the devices you have set to sync, email, your emails, creating rules that divert your emails and keep the user from, really they make rules to divert emails to keep the user from seeing that their account's been compromised. But, if they were smart and they got, maybe a account of an executive or someone in the mayor's office or something like that, boy, they could really cause some problems with the kind of sensitive information that might flow through email. So we're looking at IIS logs from our OWA stuff, and more interactions with our F5, because we're funneling more authentication stuff through that. So we're trying to get those logs. We want to see really both success and failures, because you'll see, a bunch of failures and then a success. Like, somebody guessed a password, or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. No. Excuse me. That makes absolute sense. What I want to do is I want to ask kind of one more question, and then we'll open it up to everybody else on the call if we have any questions or any discussions that they want to have. But I remember specifically this one story you told me about how you found a rogue desktop on your network right as it logged in. Can you walk everyone through the story really quick, and then how you detected it through Elastic and
Sure. I'll have to make some things up because I'm not going to tell you my secrets. But
yeah.
So lots of I guess you call them pen tester distributions. Kali Linux. There's open source OSINT stuff like Boostdoor. There's Security Onion. Can't think of a couple more off the top of my head. They're all built on distributions of Ubuntu. So Kali Linux is built on Ubuntu. It has all the hacking tools you need. Metasploit. There's a whole list of them. If you've ever looked at that before. And so we noticed that one day there were certain things Ubuntu did. So Ubuntu, by default, beacons to an internet site for time source, and it's a specific site. And we thought, well, what if people just aren't smart enough to know that and don't really pay attention? If we alerted on this, beaconing to time source, we'll know every Ubuntu box that hits network, and then we'll know if someone's got Kali Linux or whatever distribution they have of some kind of hacking tools or OSINT stuff or whatever. So we set up this alert, and sure enough, one night I'm at home. It's about 8 o'clock, and I get this alert that says, this IP address is a possible Kali Linux box. And I'm like, that's weird. That's if I see that during the day, I can go look at the IP address. I can see who's got. There are a few people who use Ubuntu for legitimate business purposes. And so I see this at 8 o'clock at night, and I'm like, this isn't good. This is somebody, and it's it's on our Wi-Fi network, so it's like, oh, anybody close to the building could be doing anything. And so I start waving the red flag, and I start asking questions, and I get one of our network guys on to look at, the, who does this IP address belong to? Which AP is it on? And they're like, that's in our conference room. And I'm like, oh, this isn't good. What's going on? Turns out that there was a night shift service desk guy who was just there. He's a new guy, and he was there taking a pen testing course. And he had the Ubuntu VM set up with Kali Linux on it. That was his lab environment, basically, for the course. And he's just sitting there, doing his thing, and had no idea that he was going to cause this kind of commotion. And so then once I saw it was there, I called the service desk manager and was like, is there anybody in our, do you have anyone on staff right now? Is there anyone there that can go look in this conference room and see if there's anyone in there or anyone near that AP? And he's like, well, yeah, it's this guy. And I said, you guy? He's like, yeah, well, call him. Let's talk to him. And sure enough, he's like, well, yeah, I'm just, passing the time taking my pen testing course. We're like, oh, okay, you're the one. So yeah, I mean, it was, and those kind of false positives are kind of useful. It lets you know your system's working properly, and it gives you a chance to do a little mini kind of incident response exercise and get people used to responding to those things, what it is you're looking for, and how to look for it. So.
Yeah, I think I'd rather have a bunch of false positives and go through the whole premise of fixing those than actually having to kind of go through the whole aspect of having something that was really a threat that you had to struggle with.
Then you have a bunch of work to do to attribute it to things, and see what's going on, and that gets to be difficult. But you do a lot of tuning with Elastic and with Sysmon because there's a lot of noise, but you find out who's using PowerShell in your environment. You account for that. You're like, okay, I can say these people use it. I don't need to monitor them as much, or rather than just monitoring when they use PowerShell, maybe I want to say if the scripts they're using are above a certain length, or maybe they're base 64 encoded. If you see that, I want to see those. I want to know what's going on, because those get into the realm of what the bad guy might use or do. So, you see false positives, but you learn a lot about your network and what's going on and what looks normal. And then it makes it really easy to say, oh, look at that right there. That is not normal. That's something I need to look at right now.
I think false positive or alert fatigue is definitely a big deal, especially in the security world. And I want to open this up to questions too as well. I see there's a question in the chat that I'll get to in a second. That's really where a lot of our machine learning comes in too. It's imagine just sitting back and saying, hey, I don't want to have to worry about these false positives anymore. I want to know what the real anomalies are, because I've actually been able to learn the behavior of specific things that are happening on my network over and over again. And then, because everyone's going to have a threshold or rule-based signal alerting, especially with our SIM, we have out-of-the-box detection rules that allow you to configure and alert on things just up and running day of within seconds, right? But the thing is that how many of these rules detections or alerting do you actually really need because before you start going crazy? And I think that's when a lot of the machine learning, just set it and forget it type of stuff of letting things run through and figuring out what specifically is an anomaly based upon user behavior analytics. And I think that's a big deal. So question in the chat. And I think this may segue. Chris, we'll start with you. Have you been able to create user behavior analysis use cases on Elastic internal to Salt Lake?
As far as from a machine learning capability, I don't know so much about that. That's something I still need to hone and get working. But from, say, just you create a dashboard So you create a dashboard maybe that we took trying to think of the exact SANS poster. There's a SANS poster out there that's titled something like "Know Where Evil Lives" or "Find Evil," and it gives you all these categories. Where in the registry do people create auto runs? Where does malware execute from? Does something execute from the recycle bin? Are there, what do you see as far as process injection? Do you see a 32-bit malware process trying to inject itself from user land into, say, a system process, 64-bit process that has system level account? And so we built these dashboards based on this SANS poster, and we just, and it's kind of this big sprawling dashboard, and it's not very visually pleasing, but I can go in there and in a few minutes I can go through it, and I can, isolate a point in time, or I can just look at what's been happening the last 24 hours, and I can see what users are doing, what kind of behavior, who's using PowerShell, who's got maybe macros enabled that are, when they open an Excel or a Word document, it goes out and opens another process or makes a connection somewhere. I can see a lot. I mean, it's computer behavior, but it's all user behavior, right? It's what the users are doing. I can look at DNS and I can see where they're going. And that's important for, if I find a computer that's compromised and I can pin down its command and control, I can be like, where else am I seeing this in my environment? And I can go back for as long as I have logs. And that really is useful for containment, because, if you don't have a good handle on logs, containment is really hard. You're not going to know what's compromised and what's not. And, I can go back and look at, I can enrich logs with Logstash, and I can put in SHA-256 hashes of files. And then I can link those and say, when you see these things, give me a link or give me something so that I can flip that out to VirusTotal and see if it's a known bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I can but I can monitor user behavior. I can see what they're doing all day if I need to. I can see, like the easiest thing that comes to my mind is phishing. I can see how the user's behaving. I can see that, Sysmon recorded Outlook opening, and not only Outlook opening, but it recorded that Outlook opened your browser. So I can see, if Outlook process opened and then Outlook opened Chrome, somebody's clicked on a link in an email. And then I can see, with the Chrome log, it will give me the URL, and it's right there, and I can see where they've gone. And it makes it pretty easy to determine if something's suspicious or if you need to follow up with it or not. So, I mean, you can see a lot of things that the users are doing. Just, we don't use it so much. The alerting gets tiresome, but we have a lot of dashboards created that we can look at real quick, and we can isolate machines or user accounts so that they're the only ones that show up in those dashboards. And we can see, look at that machine at this point, process an Outlook plugin, for example, injected itself into a system process. And, that's dangerous. Now you've gone from user land to system, and then, that's a pretty good indicator that you have a problem.
Yeah.
And so you can see behaviors that the user might not even know is going on with their computer.
Yeah. So speaking of which, too, there's a follow-up question, like what can be done with the machine learning capabilities of Elastic? So a couple things. One, we can do a deep dive on machine learning, especially when it comes to user behavior analysis for Elastic. I'm going to do a super short, high level, and then we'll get to Robert's question in just a second. So, I mean, you can take a look and analyze any type of user behavior on top of what Chris just said, building out dashboards. But then you can also take this user behavioral analytics and forecast it into the future up to 10 years with Elastic too as well. Best thing about Elastic, especially with UBA, is that you can just set it just comes right out of the box. We have a bunch of detection rules, a bunch of analysis, a bunch of anomalous data findings that all you have to do is ingest some type of data as long as it's in the ECS format, which stands for Elastic Common Schema, you can run any type of UVA or any type of anomaly threshold for any type of that data. What I do suggest, if you would actually like to do a deeper dive on some of the machine learning capabilities of Elastic, please reach out to me directly. I'll make sure that I put my email, and I would love to, I can send you some videos, or I can even just do a deep dive for you as well on Elastic and how we do UVA. But because we only have 8 minutes left, I want to make sure we have enough answers for the questions. But please feel free to reach out to me. I also put in the chat, if you're interested, the Elastic's Guide to Threat Hunting. It's a free PDF/ebook. The link's in the chat, grab it. It's a really good book about threat hunting and how each of the roles are separated, how SOCs interact. It's written by security specialists inside Elastic, and it's a really informative guide. I highly suggest you read it. So next, we have a question from Robert. Hey, Robert. Long time no talk, but what is your next step with Elastic, Chris? And then what is the next phase or enhancement that you see from your side of the house?
So right now we're on, our cluster's on 6.8.8, and we had some issues with updating the WinLog beats just because of changes made to Elastic, and we were doing a bunch of different things with Logstash and enriching logs, and something got hung up in there. I'm not sure what. So I took our dev environment and I pretty much just dumped it and I rebuilt it and I put it 7.8. And then in the process of doing that, I set up a test workstation to ship logs to our development environment. And I noticed that in WinLog beats, you guys now have security modules. I mean, it's a new thing. I think it's still in beta. But there's a security module which has there's a little JavaScript that has a whole list of security-centric event viewer event IDs that it pulls. Plus, also there's a sysmon module. And so I was like, what are these? This is new. And I put those in. I was able to pretty much remove all of our Logstash enrichment pipeline and just use these modules and basically configure things from the endpoint. And I'm still kind of testing that and figuring out how that works. But that's real interesting to me because now I don't have a bunch of Logstash enrichment filters that it has to go through. And if you get syntax wrong in there, or if Elastic, Elastic's been moving so fast, and especially with regard to security things. I mean, to your credit, you guys have looked at what people like me are doing, and now you've created this whole other way of doing it with some of those modules. It's like, well, that makes it a lot easier for me because now I don't have to, the WinLog beats agent is going to take care of a lot of the noise that I'm trying to filter out in other ways. And so I have to do a lot less work using kind of those things. So headed that way. I want to get into the machine learning stuff. I still haven't, I need to get your guys' sim up and working. There's so many things. Yeah. I'm only one person, so I have a lot of stuff that I'd like to be working on. But I noticed those security modules, and that makes things a lot easier for me.
Yeah, I think the newer. Sorry to cut you off. I apologize, Chris. But I think a lot of our newer releases, and you hit the nail on the head. We evolve fast, and it's kind of the way security is too. And I said this earlier: is that security moves at the speed of light. Hackers, they want to know how to get in faster or go around something that didn't work before. And so I think moving fast from Elastic's point of view is always a good thing. And like you said, we took what you're doing, people like you, like IT, SOC, security people, and we made their way of doing it hopefully easier. So I think moving forward, especially with our SIM, the ease of like a timeline, for example, of dragging and drop, just a simple value, and then seeing everything. Like you made a comment of, is PowerShell open? And then what script are they running from the PowerShell? That type of stuff is that we are now collecting by default from Elastic. And you can easily find that by no queries to write. It's a drag and drop, and it's super easy. But yeah, I apologize for interrupting, but so getting into the security modules of Elastic are beats. What else? What is your next step, or is that kind of just that's your next phase?
The utilizing the SIM more. So
Yeah.
Like you said, the drag and drop stuff, and being able to see relationships between different parts of the system, right? If you're looking at it in a log view, you might see a certain process start, and then it might be a couple minutes before it really opens another process, and there might be 1,000 logs between those two things. So those kind of things from a log view perspective are kind of hard to see. But if you have it in, say, your SIM, and you can link those relationships and say, only see, process A started here, and then it injected a thread into another process maybe 5 minutes later. And without having to sift through all that noise in between and just see those relationships in the SIM is going to make my life a lot easier.
I hear you. Well, we have a couple minutes left. So what I want to do is I want to say thank you to everybody who is attending in the attendees list. I put my email address in the chat. So if I have never talked to you before, please feel free to reach out. I'm here to help. I'd love to talk to you about security all day long. I'd love to talk to you about Elastic all day long. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see you in person anytime soon, but we can Zoom chat, have a cup of coffee. It's all great. I love doing it all. I also want to say thank you to Chris for volunteering to do this. This was awesome. I really enjoy hearing what you're doing at Salt Lake County, where you're going to go. And I love the fact that you're actually using Elastic for solving problems. And I think that's a really big deal from where we are. It comes all the way down from our CEO. And he says it all the time. He wants to make software that people not only find valuable, but can solve problems with. And I think our community is so large that we have so many downloads of Elastic. I think it's proven that not only people are using it, but they're using it to benefit and to do things in their daily life. I mean, at least I have a home lab here at my house that I monitor everything on my network. And I love it. I know I don't need to have a subscription for it specifically to do some of the things that I need to do just at home. But for an enterprise agency or even a higher education, that subscription, the support, the added benefits, it's a big deal. So I want to say thank you to everyone for coming. Chris, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, everybody, hopefully we'll see you on the next user group. Hopefully you found this beneficial. Please shoot me over an email, contact me. Like I said, happy to help. Thank you so much.